everybody. Dan Hardle here again with my brother Mike Hardle. Coming at you today with a new episode. Really what we're wanting to talk about is new agents and, those old traditional agents versus the new agents, really, and how much the business has evolved and changed, and those that are adapting well with it, those that aren't, and just kind of comparing how the business was done and what it's taking to be successful in the environment now going into this new plan year 2024, new regs, just the state of the industry in general. So I would say, Mike, you have more kind of direct, more of a pulse, direct interacting with those agents and distribution and people in the field, people virtually on the phone. What are your thoughts initially?
Yeah, well, first of all, my thoughts are excited to get our second episode in the can, right? Like, hopefully our video is a little bit better. Where the first episode are probably a little bit like Ricky Bobby, where we, don't know what to do with our hands and where to look. We're figuring it all out. So excited to be here. Yeah, like Dan's saying, I think what we'll do is go back in history a little bit too, specifically as it relates to Medicare and selling Medicare policies. How it used to be versus how it is now. Because like Dan said, the biggest disconnect that I see as president of sales and talking to literally thousands of agents and paying attention to the sales mechanisms of the industry, there's just been a real transition period. And the biggest obstacle that I see for agents to be successful these days is either a failure of the old guard agents to adapt, or these newer agents that have got in the business, during the virtual times or post-COVID, and how they're not really able to generate any grassroots business themselves, and they just kind of get left on an island. So let's take it back. Let's rewind history a little bit, Dan, and why don't you, for those agents who've been in the industry for a while, let's take it back to the good old days of when we first got into the industry in the MA days and how you used to do it.
Yeah, if you go back 2007, 8, 9, early years back in the day when Medicare Advantage was a new product, we really didn't have as many regulations, right? So back in the day, you could almost just get a list of, here's some people that are on Medicare or going to be on Medicare, and you could just cold call, set an appointment, go out there. I always kind of refer to it, it was the Wild Wild West, What was that movie? Nicole Kidman, Tom Cruise? They got to settle America in the West, and it was like a land grab. I forget.
Far away?
Far and away. Yeah. It was kind of like Far and Away, man. It was just like uncharted territory, and you could just go out there and take anything you wanted and claim it.
And back then, money wasn't in it like it is now, right? Like for insurance carriers.
Yeah, they were actually just going at that point away, where back in the day, you used to get paid $400 per sale. And it didn't matter if it was new, renewal, initial, nothing like that. It was just, you get $400. And it didn't matter what they found. Agents were churning business all the time. They would just go out there and, 1 year, Aetna is the best product for you. Sign up here. The next year, turns out United Healthcare is better for you. And they would just flip the same business over and over and get a $400 commission. And then, enter them changing that and introducing renewal commissions and lifetime commissions. And that's really when it was like, damn, there's really money in this industry. It was like right about that. That was like that big inflection point.
Yeah, back then the Medicare beneficiaries that were early adopters of MA too, they were trained to almost go to like the annual rollout meetings and get a free meal, and then go get a bunch of free meals with whoever wanted to offer them
plate liquors.
Yeah. Eat some good food, eat a few snake dinners, and then be like, I'll choose this one for this next year.
No, back in the day, to your point, you could cold call a bunch of people and say, hey, I'm doing a seminar down at the steakhouse right here. Come, and you could buy people buffets, steak, whatever, and you can load them up, put 30 people at the Golden Corral, sign up 17 of them there on the spot, and then go follow up with another 10 and write 27 deals from doing, a pitch that way. And you could, you didn't have as many restrictions when it came to referrals, what you could pay, what you could split commissions. That's how it was. And then, slowly, like everything, they've kind of started to year over year, just rein it in, change the commissions, brought out like the FMV, like the fair market value for the commissions. They also capped it too, because back in the day, let's say, just as an example, Humana was in a market and they had the majority of the market share, and a new carrier comes in, the commissions weren't fixed. They didn't have FMV. So if the new carrier wanted to get market share, they could just pay higher commission. and then the brokers would sell that plan. So, they started figuring all that out, curbing it, and then bringing in FMV, slowly bringing in these restrictions.
Regulation,
and now here we are today. And
so just so, because I think it'd be interesting for everybody to learn, and one of the things that I'm proud about you about is most of our competitors are second generation insurance FMOs, or they were in the supplement business for 30 years, or they're second generation business owners. We're one of the only modern FMOs that's really grown up in the industry from like the MA world. So just kind of talk about how you got into the industry, how you used to do business, kind of like your experience and the way you used to gen leads. And then I'll briefly talk about how I kind of trailed and followed you into the industry.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. And I mean, a lot of my competitors and people out there, they were in long-term care or life or other product lines. They were distributing other things. And then MA rolled along and it just was a new line they started carrying. But yeah, the principals or other people didn't.
They already had agents and distribution.
Yeah, they didn't go to the kitchen table and build it from scratch. So that's true. That's how we're a lot different. Back in the day, I did it. And that's always one thing that's, different about our org is I'm really not out of touch with the business and the industry and what the agents go through because I've lived it, and progressed through all those stages. But yeah, I got into it back in the day, candidly, when young, I was going to school. And to be honest, in my younger 20s, this, basically was going to college, working at Comcast, doing door-to-door sales, which you got me that job, by the way. Put in a good word, got that door-to-door gig. It was sweet. I can't say enough great things. It was a great company to me. But anyways, started doing door-to-door sales while going to college, and I wanted to get an economics degree. And, at that phase where I would work maybe 3-4 hours a day getting my door-to-door deals, sandbagging deals.
Go play some ESPN 2K5.
Have a good day. We'd sandbag some sales and not work the next day. I mean, I've lived this life. Things were good. I mean, back in the day, we were making anywhere from $70,000 to $100,000 a year in our 20s. And newly married, my wife was working. She was making good money. And when you're a couple that's 23, 24 years old and you're making $150,000 a year with benefits, man, it was pretty sweet, right?
Working 10 hours a week.
Yeah, I mean, going to college, tuition reimbursement, all that. I mean, definitely. It was great. And then I had this buddy, Randy. Well, he wasn't at the time. So when I was at Comcast, this agent, Randy, always beat me in sales. He just was the number one guy, couldn't unseat him, couldn't beat him. And after I'd been there like 2-3 years, I thought I was, young, hot shit.
And we kind of thought he was this like stranger old guy, but
yeah, I mean,
he had it figured out.
I thought I was good, and he would always beat me. And so after a while, and I remember not even being nice to him for a while too. And anyways, I chummied up to him. He was great. And I was like, man, how do you make all these sales every month? How do you beat me? And after a while, he's like, I don't even care about this job,
Yeah. I just work it for the benefits.
Yeah, and he goes, I'm just here for the benefits and the stock program, the match. And I was like, what are you talking about, man? You're making over $100,000 a year. And he goes, yeah, I know. I don't care about the money. I'm making all my money in insurance. I'm like, what? You must be making crazy money. I want to make money. And he's like, okay, go get your license and I'll show you. That was it. That was like, it's like, okay, if you go get your insurance license, I'll show you how I do this. And I was like, great. I didn't get any help. It was like going to Google, trying to figure out how do I get my health insurance license in Utah, searching it, ordering a book that came in the mail from Kaplan, 2 weeks later with the CD. And as I was working my job and going to my semester with anatomy, physiology, and micro and macroeconomics and all these other classes, I get this book with a disc. And so while I'm driving around my other job, listened to the disc, studied for like 2 weeks, went and took my test, got a 72%, probably something like that. And the rest is history, right? Then I went back to him and was like, hey man, I got my license. And he's like, okay, here's what we do. And he just, took me at the time and appointed me with United Healthcare as an ICA. And I guess I'm okay saying this, even if the United Healthcare people are flustered. But an independent career agent, an ICA, it is the opposite of being independent. I was captive to United Healthcare. So, anyways,
but back then in our market, being captive to United was like there was one plan. They were the 800-pound gorilla.
Yeah, it's not like you're in Houston and there's 76 different plans. There was 3-4 plans in the market, and that was the dominant one. So it was pretty easy. But I was an ICA. I went into that role, kind of struggled because there wasn't a lot of training. And it was hard, I'll be honest with you, because there weren't a lot of resources. And back in 2007, there weren't, I can Google now anything about Medicare and pull up searches and documents and read and learn about it. It was not that way back then.
We sound like back in my day, you know?
Yeah, we walked uphill both ways with gunny sacks around our feet.
And
right?
Medicare booklets in our hands.
But I shit you not, I really did have a roller bag sometimes with all the different plans that I carried around and lugged to appointments because it wasn't online. And anyways, so where were we at? So
you're as an ICA.
Yeah, so I was an ICA. It was tough. And then United Healthcare had a job come up as an ISR. It's their independent sales representative. It's an employed job. And it actually was a pay cut for me because at the time I was still working at Comcast, making good money, doing like 2 jobs and going to school. And it was kind of like the side hustle. And I actually told my wife that I really loved selling Medicare more than door to door or whatever. I felt like I was selling a product. The thing I always liked about Medicare is you'd go in the home and you felt like you made a difference. Like you were helping somebody save money on their prescription drugs. Some people were just low income. They are choosing between buying groceries and prescription drugs. And, you know, you'd leave their home and they're giving you books, you know, for your kids. They're giving you food from their garden. They bake you cookies. I mean, you feel at the end of the day, you come home and it's rewarding. You got paid well. So I told my wife, like, I like this. I want to do it full time. And she's like, okay. So I applied. I got this job at United Healthcare as an employee. I did it for 6 months. And I will tell you, the training was great. I learned in that 6 months, I learned more than most agents learned in probably 3 or 4 years. And I will give shout out and props to Cammie Grandy. She was there at United Healthcare, you knew? Man, she was like passionate. She loved it. She was one of those people that would go above and beyond for like everything. And she kind of like took us under her wing a little bit and helped us more. Same with Donnell Keller, shout out. And they were great. They support us a lot. And so I learned, I flourished, I got really good and proficient. And within my second month, or actually my first month there, I was the top ISR. And, you know, so with right out of the gate, I was the top agent. You know, only being there 6 months, I finally felt like I'm confident. I know how to do this. And I immediately quit again. And I told United Healthcare, like, hey, it's okay. I'm quitting this job, but I'm going to sell more for you than even before because now it's my business. I own it. I'm invested. I'll write you. And it's true. And I did. And I left as an ICA. I went out. I did all the hard stuff. I, you know, quit my job at the time. My, you know, my wife, we had our first kid and we went from 2 incomes or 3 incomes to like no income. So that was pretty miserable. I won't go into all the ugly details of that, but it was rough. And so I've been there, done that. And anyways, so I went to selling anywhere from 200 to 400 Medicare plans a year, like for a couple of years, just stacking wins and selling those couple hundred policies, building my book of business, doing the grind. You know, everything from, you know, United Healthcare would give me some leads, but it was mostly, you know, I treated it just like I should. Randy taught me too, and I'll give him credit for this. I learned this lesson from him back in the day, and he said, Dan, when I go to work, when I go to book my appointments on the phone, I'm a professional. I go to work. He's like, I put on my shirt, I put on my tie, I get dressed up for it, and it changes my mental focus, and I'm in a different headspace. And so when you go to book your appointments on the phone, dress the part. And it like resonated with me. So, and he's like, and this is how I do it. I start off the week on Monday and I start booking all my appointments for Saturday. And same thing. I worked, people don't know this, for the first years and years and years of my career, I worked 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. And I was working probably 12 to 14 hour days, Monday through Friday. And then on Saturday, I would work 3 or 4 hours, like, you know, from 8 to noon. And then that afternoon was time I had to do stuff with my kids and my family and stuff like that. But so Monday I would get on the phone and he said, book up your Saturday. So you determine what, how much time you have in your schedule and book that Saturday appointment. Book 2 or 3 on that Saturday. Once you get Saturday booked, book your Friday, then book your Thursday and work your way backward. And hopefully the goal is you grind it out on Monday and book out your whole week. If you don't, Tuesday, you're waking up and you're booking more appointments. And then I started doing that, and then I started also carving out 4 to 6 hours of my calendar as a block to go do B2B and biz dev, and that's what I would do too. So Mondays I was on the phone, basically, hopefully not Tuesday, but sometimes if phones are rough and I couldn't fill out my calendar. So Tuesday as well. And then I got to the point where on Wednesdays I would go, and that's my biz dev day, where I'd be going by doc offices. I'd be going by PNC shops, tax planners, funeral homes, all the other professionals, where I was trying to like get my name out there, see if I could go do like an educational seminar for a chamber of commerce or this, whatever. Could I do a lunch and learn at a business and talk to a business about like their group plan? Do you have any, employees that are over 65 that would be better served on a Medicare Advantage plan? So I was doing all my own biz dev that way on Wednesdays, and then just on the phone grinding and booking my appointments. And, so after a couple years doing that, it turned into, I had a few carriers come to me and say like, man, you're great. We like it. Why don't you start an agency and start training other agents? Do what as good as you are, train others. And I was like, I don't know about that. It was never like the plan. It wasn't the game plan. And so I thought like, yeah, I'll do that. So we did. I started a GA, got a contract for it. You were one of my first agents. I actually had a couple. It was Charlene, Doug, you,
Brad,
my brother. There was about 5 of us is all. Kind of a misfit motley crew that we had, right? And but I remember our first enrollment season, we knocked out, like 800 apps in our first season, just a couple of us. And then from there, it was just off to the races. And then it was, hey, can you come recruit and train agents in Idaho? Can you come recruit agents in Nevada? Can you do, and from there, it's just, there's no looking back. It's just been trajectory and growth. And here we are today and doing 3 lines of business and agents in all 50 states and call center and field and, sub-distribution to agency partner. And it's just where it's at today. So, but yeah, very long-winded, but that's really, I've been there. I've lived that good old life back in the day.
Yeah, so I have some color and some context to add to that as like getting the front row seat to all of it, because I was doing well at Comcast, doing sales at the same time, and I was like, Dan, you go and see how that insurance thing works out.
That's what everybody told me. Hey, you go be the guinea pig and see how it works for you. Then I'll think about it.
So I got in the very next year after you had an annual enrollment. And, for me, it was a point I remember sitting in a sales meeting at Comcast one day thinking, how much money do I want to be making? What would I feel like because Mom always wanted one of us to be a doctor or a lawyer or something. And same with my wife. It was like, that was the benchmark. And so I'm like, well, what does a doctor or a lawyer make? And I remember thinking in my mind, I got to make X amount of dollars. And even though I was very good, I'm like, I'll never do that here at Comcast. I'll never be able to make that. So I'm like, I'm going to do something extra to get me that level. So I got into insurance. And back then, like Dan said, a lot of you agents these days, like I say, we shake our fist like kids these days. You're spoiled. We didn't have Google wasn't what Google is. There was no information, especially in Medicare Advantage. Nobody knew what that product was. There was maybe like one human in the state that you would be able to find those answers to, but we had to be resourceful. And, when Dan talks about, he doesn't really get into the details of it. I always wish he would more, because when agents are in this business new and they're struggling, we know what that's like. I mean, Dan paid the price. Like, he suffered and sacrificed financially, and many of us that were close to him witnessed what he was willing to go through to take a step back to really, plant the foundation. And it's like, look at me now type of thing, where it's like, oh, it must be nice. It must be nice. And it's like, yeah, it is nice. But, that's because I witnessed him put in the work and the sacrifice and all the hard work, and has continued to do that to get the business to the point of where it's at right now. And that's really, a bragging, secondhand brag for him on my part, just because I see so many other people who are like, oh, now I'm making this. It's all in my pocket. And he's always been willing to set that aside and treat it like a business and grow it like a business. And that's really what's made the difference. But when I got into business.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah. When I got into the business, Dan, there was no training, right?
Do you want me to tell him what my training was?
Tell me what your training was, and I'll tell you what my training was.
All right, my training from Randy, who by the way, he still is probably one of, if not the best salesperson that I've ever come across, I've ever met.
Maybe one of the best agents in the country.
Yeah, sure. I think his writing number with United Healthcare was DW003. Like he was the third ICA in the country or something like that. And probably, again, one of the best salespeople I've ever come across in my life. And the thing that's unique about him is he's the most selfless person, too, that will just help other people, give him the shirt off his back. He's not looking for comp. He's not looking for anything else. He's just a great guy. And his little pitches and intros and opens and closes are just so good. And I still learn from him to this day. But and he's one of our agents, by the way. So, full circle, that's a story for another day. But still kicking butt, taking names, years later. But my training, after I, went in and first got appointed and had a writing number and did certifications and could sell, it's like, hey, Randy, what do I do now? Here's a list. Call these people and tell them you want to go talk to them about their Medicare. Okay. So got a list, couple hundred people, start my dials, cold calling, no script, no nothing, just call them. So I did that. Within the first day, got an appointment, because I've always done sales, right? So got an appointment, called them up, Randy, I have an appointment. I'm going there in 3 days. What do I do? Take this book. And he's like, all you got to do is read through it. The only thing you have to do is just check these lists in the back with their medications and just ask them if their doctor's there and just sign them up. Okay. That was all my training. So, of course, me being what I am, I'm like, how to get it, read the sales kit myself, kind of like go through it, study it. And I'm still like sweating bullets. Like, I don't even know what I'm freaking doing, and I showed up to that first appointment. I will tell you, I closed that deal. The very first one I ever went to, I closed it, wrote an app, called them up. I was like, Randy, I wrote that app. He's like, kick ass, Dan, go get more, and that was like it. That was all my training, anything I ever got. And, everything else was just all self-learning, from there to here.
Yeah. So Dan had been in it a year and he was doing a community meeting at the Golden Corral and I think it was right around October 15th or maybe 3 days before. And I just got certified just in time for the selling season. And I was like, well, I have an appointment tomorrow. I'd booked an appointment. And he's like, well, just come watch my Golden Corral pitch. So I showed up in the back, sat while he pitched at the Golden Corral to about 10 or 12 seniors. And then at the end, he's like, hey, you just take this book and you just read it to them. And I'm like, okay. So he gave me the United Healthcare kit. I sat down at my first appointment, read through the book, told him the name. The way that they used to train you back then was all the things that you needed to cover for your compliant presentation were on that sales kit. So you just would go through those key points. I did that to my first guy, and I wrote my first appointment as well. And I think I wrote my first 200 appointments in before I actually left an in-home appointment without a paper app in hand. So we had good training back in the day. The industry was definitely different. And that's kind of one of the things that, I want to talk about. And we set that up by talking about, the good old days. And in a way, it used to be easier, but it also used to be harder, right? These insurance carriers, they had to have a physical body to go get a wet signature on all these apps. And as the industry has progressed, of course, technology and progress and scalability and money have come into the industry and really changed it.
Well, it's like, we called it like the good old days, right? But at the same time, to your point, there wasn't much training out there. There wasn't much available. Like, you had to really be a student and go work your butt off. Like I had to spend hours every week, every weekend, Sunday nights, whatever. You're searching all these terms and trying to find websites and study and learn more, because it wasn't readily available. And carriers weren't like robust and developed like they are now, where there's an Ignite newsletter coming out. Like my email inbox is like 357 emails a day of stuff from different carriers in different states. And there's this training, come to our in-person come to our, you know what I mean? There's just incredible amounts of training now that didn't exist. So back in the day, that was difficult, learning, getting access to the training. And then of course, we didn't have great lookup tools and technology like we have today. So it literally was, I joked about a roller bag or just a giant freaking briefcase that I was lugging, sitting down with somebody and plopping out all these books and trying to, what med are you taking? Ah, crap. And eventually you'd get to the point where you're like,
6 booklets.
Simvastatin, lisinopril, Advair. You knew exactly what tier it was on.
We
with
could
Humana
be
or United
pharmacist techs.
Or whatever. Like you knew. And so you're like, they just said Advair. That's only tier 2 on this plan. I'm going there, but you'd have to get out like your formulary, look it up, and then your doc provider directory was like a phone book, like that thick.
Yep.
So that stuff was hard back then, and I remember making my own like cheat sheet, like my own little spreadsheet where
Comparison tools. And
like I had a bill. It wasn't there. I made it. So like every year, benefits would come out from these different carriers, and I'd have to go and like put like, here's a column header for PCP, specialist, MOOP, whatever else, and I had to build my own tracker and then start studying that and getting more proficient. And then like after your first, second, third, 10th appointment that season, you'd start to memorize the different like copays, formularies, all that kind of stuff. And then like, and then you would naturally just be able to kind of position that sale to the right carrier. But it was nothing out of the box. You had to do it yourself back in the day.
It's funny too, because as an FMO now and bringing on and talking to all these agents, there was the time when we got kind of kicked to the curb as ICAs from United. I can't remember if they just decided they were going to kill the program.
No, I didn't get kicked to the curb. No, it was funny. So, I'll talk about this openly. Barry Street. So Barry just left United maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. And it was this moment where I had this good year where I had written like 200 and something apps already before we were even into AEP season. And it was like, I was an ICA, right? So I was captive to United, and I hadn't even gotten anything from them all year that year. I hadn't gotten a single community meeting. I didn't get leads. And I'm like, dude, I've already put 200 and something apps on your books, and I've gotten nothing from you. And then that year we were supposed to get like community meetings and leads and all this stuff because we're captive, right? Supposed to get it. We got nothing. Like we're talking like nothing. Like they had me book all these community meetings. I was having to pay the tab for no one to show up. And I remember still grinding through that AEP, and I wrote maybe 100, 150 that AEP, but it was all me. There was like not any of it that came from the company. And I remember just the whole room of ICAs just pissed, all of them. You remember it? Pitchforks out, everybody's mad. And I respect this. Barry came into town. He was like, hey, look, what happened is there was a Blue Cross plan exit in California, and it was 500,000 members that were SAR, service area reduction. And so we just shifted our budget in the West over to California, and we had to go get that member acquisition. And it was just like this aha light bulb moment where I was like, oh my gosh, like my whole business was dependent upon them and their business strategy. And I can't do that. It's not scalable. It's not sustainable long-term. So there's that moment, United Healthcare still had the best product in the market, everything. And I was just like, I quit. I'm not doing this ICA thing. I'm going to go be an independent FMO, and people thought I was crazy because they were like, what does it matter if you want to go sell Humana or Aetna or whatever else because their products suck? And it's like, no, it's that I can't be, basically subject to whatever business decisions they're making, and that was my moment where I was like, I'm out.
Yeah, I can't remember how I ended up with a competitor FMO, but my experience with signing up for our first FMO that wasn't us or you.
That's a whole nother podcast, by the way.
Yeah.
Just FMOs and the shady and distribution.
I went and sat with this FMO who we're very friendly with, and when I had left the ICA channel and I signed up this big, thick contract, and he pushed it across the desk at me.
Literally pushed it across
the desk and it's like, sign this. I'm like, all right. And I'm like, now what? And he's like, I don't know. I guess you could go do some mailers or something, and if you want, I'll split it with you. And I was like, okay. So that we said all that to be like, back in the good old days, and like we worked hard uphill in the snow both ways with, we were pioneers in the MA industry, in this industry, like so many people.
We could talk in another podcast, but I don't have very much sympathy for agents getting in the door these days because I don't know that I've ever found an agent who went through more painful shit that I did for the first couple of years getting in the business. So I kind of don't have a whole lot of sympathy.
That's kind of the overall like tough love message of this episode for agents is that so many people now, and this is like looping it back to what we were talking about in the beginning, is the way that the business was and the way that the business is now. When I talk to the average agent now that wants to get into the business, either the agent's been in the business for a long time like us, and the good agents, there's still a lot of great agents out there that are killing it. They're dynamic, they're flexible, but those guys and gals are becoming more dynamic and more rare and more of a precious commodity in the industry. And the people that were able to weather the changes during COVID and then kind of like adapt back and use tech and tools and become what we call modern agents, shout out to all of you guys. You guys are just doing an amazing job. Any agents that have come in, I don't say any, but a lot of agents that we deal with now that are newer to the industry, they come to the table a lot with like just the handout, like, well, what are you going to do for me? And we call them FMO hoppers. And it's like
we also call them last chance millionaires.
Yeah, last chance millionaires. You talked about getting your insurance license, and a lot of people, it's like a lot of realtors, they think once they pass that test, they're like, "Where's my $1 million? I passed the test now."
Well, because they watch $1 Million Listing and thought,
put my money in my hand now, and it's like, no, that's like literally step one. You're on the first step there.
Well, the other thing that I would bring up too that you mentioned is the weekend warriors that we call them. Like, it is one thing, like I started off that way, side hustle, but at the same time, what we found is back 10, 15 years ago, you could side hustle this and have some success. And you could also, a lot of these agents, not be active all the time and then just kind of rear your head and show up around AEP time, and suddenly it's September 1st. It's getting close to the open enrollment season. I think I'm going to get my certifications done and go bang out 100 applications and make some money. That was kind of the mentality back in the day for a lot of agents, and those weekend warrior agents that kind of want to dabble on the side, they're not writing business like they used to. And that segment of agent, just like in real estate, those right now, the real estate market and those agents that were kind of part-timers, kind of not really, it's not their thing that they're treating like a business day in and day out. They're the ones really struggling. And
Yep.
So, and it's the same in the insurance industry. The industry now, it needs a higher caliber agent that's more committed, that is more dynamic. And those are the people that are going to succeed.
Yeah, it's interesting because we talked about the agents that were doing business before COVID, and I see a lot of agents that have been in the business for as long as we have, or almost as long as we have. They almost have this like romantic idea that the industry is going to go back to the way that it used to be, that it's going to go back to, there's only a handful of us good quality agents out there, and we're going to go meet Mima at the kitchen table, and we're going to enforce election periods, and it's only going to be done during AEP, and we're going to cut out all of the noisy actors in the industry, and that it's going to course correct at some point, and the telemarketers are going to stop, and the international, and the lead syndication people are all going to stop, and it's going to go back to how it was 10 years ago. And the reality is that genie's never going back in the bottle.
It's not. And you know what else too, to add to that, is you have all these, naysayers, and they spend all this time and energy to be the community compliance monitors in their own community. And I talk to agents that spend all this time, and they're like, I recorded this, or I have this mail piece from this agent, I'm sending this to CMS, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to report this agent. And I'm going, you're spending 10 hours of your week trying to be a compliance monitor. Just be better. If you want to go grow your business and you want to succeed, you need to not worry about all that other stuff, and you need to just be better yourself.
Yep.
That's how you're going to go win.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Michael Phelps meme. I can't even remember the guy that was racing against him, but he's they're swimming, he's looking over at Michael Phelps. It's like you're never going to be ahead. All the best agents are just worrying about themselves and about being compliant, and they don't have the time to go hound down and investigate everybody else that's a bad actor in the industry. But what my message is to all of you agents is the industry's better than there's more opportunity actually than there's ever been.
Yep.
But what we're seeing is a decreasing amount of agents that are willing to go through the heartache, the pain and the suffering that it takes up front, the sacrifice to get to where they want to be long term, or they're unwilling to put the necessary work in up front. And, we talk a lot about like FMO hoppers, and we'll get people that contract with us, and we try to do we joke about this all the time, but we try to do a very good job of vetting people out,
Yep.
setting realistic expectations. And the conversation will go sometimes of like, hey, you got to be a self-starter. You've got to be willing to work hard. We're going to help you do this, but you've got to be willing to do this, and you've got to be willing to put these hours in, and you've got to be willing to scrimp and save and sacrifice and put the work in. And it almost has like a counter effect on agents. They're like, oh no, that's me, 100%.
I'm a self-starter. That sounds exactly like me. And then you talk to them, and they're like, yeah, I woke up and the the stars and the moon weren't aligned, so I didn't get out of bed and go to work that day. And you're like, you are not a self-starter. Not at all.
Yeah, so I've heard a lot of people in the industry, and the carriers, this is even on the carriers' radar right now, is there's a need for agents. Like we were talking about at lunch today, there's a need for dynamic producing agents. And a lot of times us agents, the agent community, is acting in their collective detriment because we're not acting and we're not producing and putting out the numbers like a good, vibrant agent community needs to or used to. And so just like we always tell our agents, the carriers are going to solve it. You know, they're going to find those distribution means through different mechanisms. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, and you're going to the industry's going to replace you.
Well, and not only that, but like, so a carrier, they have their shareholders, you know, whether you're Cigna or it's Molina or United, whoever it is, they got to get their numbers. And so it's like before, if distribution's not going to do it, they're going to ramp up and increase their DTC, right? They're going to ramp up their spend, their partnership, their acquisition with, you know, these big call centers. You know, they're going to, you know, in some markets where their product's not good, they're going to have their own captive employed sales force. They're, you know, whatever that strategy looks like, they're going to get their numbers. And it's like, you can either be part of it and achieve it for them and have that like leverage, so to speak, in your place within the marketplace. Or if you don't, and the agents collectively as a whole continue to write less and less percentage of the overall business, it puts the agent community in a bad situation. Meaning that, like any business relationship where when it's a really give and a take and a partnership there, the terms are very fair. But, you know, the more and more that we go down the road where agents, let's say, drop to 50% of the business, to 40%, to 30%, if that independent agent community drops to where they're ever doing 10, 20% of the business, then the carrier goes, they can figure out alternative solutions. Or, you know, they could hypothetically mess with comp plans. They could, you know, do all kinds of things. And I'm not saying that, you know, there's any nefarious strategy out there from carriers to do that. It's just the reality of what could potentially happen over the next 3 to 5 years if these independent agents don't continue to thrive, bring more people in, grow that side of the business.
Yeah. Let me give you kind of a tale of two agents that I see, right? I see agents that have been in the industry. They built their book of business. They have a few hundred clients on the books on Medicare. They dabble in some other products. You know, they're making a good living. They start getting comfortable, right? And over COVID, everything went virtual for the most part, right? And COVID, just like many other things, was a great reset of the industry. Now you have a lot of those agents that weathered the storm. They've adapted. You know, shout out to Randy, one of our guys. He's adapted masterfully, and he's still crushing it and still killing it in a different era. And
in
his
70s,
yeah,
you know,
and a lot of those agents are kind of like, well, these call centers, they're just stealing. They're just using. I don't even know what SEP you're using. You know, I see on these forums all the time, and people are just crying all day long, all year long about expecting somebody else to fix the industry or fix their problems. Meanwhile, those guys that were pretty much set up and they had big books of business are seeing their books of business slowly declining and whittling down. And now they've been out of the game effectively for a few years. And then it's like, oh, hey, now I'm trying to get back into this, but they almost have to reinvent themselves, you know?
They do. And there's two things that kind of really play into that, right? Is number one, they should have never taken their foot off of the gas during those COVID years, right? Like, if you're never staying status quo, you're either, what is it that, like, Raylan Givens says on Justified? He's like, there's no such thing as being on time. You're either early or you're late.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, by the way, it's one of my favorite shows. But anyways, you just can't stay in this status quo situation. You're either losing or winning all the time with your business and your book of business and all that. So I think that was a big mistake. It put people in a bad situation. For some agents, again, talking about these different agent types, and now they're trying to make up ground. And same thing, they're complaining about things rather than them saying, hey, I need to be better. I need to sharpen my skills. I need to figure out new ways to market. I need a new lead source. I need to go gen things. I need to really buckle back down to where it was like the first year or two getting in the business and go really regrow my business. They just sit around and mire and self-pity and, complain about everything instead of trying to solve the problem. That's one thing that I'm really seeing. The other is adapting to technology and really having to embrace that, because it's not going anywhere. And the more and more we go down this road with CMS, and whether it be disclaimers, call recordings, the 48-hour scope rule, all these other things, you can't comply and do all these things if you're not embracing technology. And everything from technology we have now, I mean, we're talking like AI, and in school, they're in my son's middle school, they're teaching them how to make great queries for OpenAI and ChatGPT, and that's the world that we're living in. And so when you have an agent who won't even use a CRM to track their clients or set automations or contact with them and stay in touch with them, it's, that's the other thing that's really harming them, is that lack of adapting to technology from some. And to those of you who are doing it, you're amazing. We've been through a lot as an industry over the last 5 to 10 years. Really rapid, quick changes. So for those of you who are out there who have done it and are killing it, kudos to you.
Yeah, so that kind of leads into, I was talking about the two different types of agents. I see one, kind of the old agent that's like failing to adapt, and then the second is kind of these modern agents, and a lot of them got into the industry during the COVID years, when a lot of the Joe Namath ads were prevalent, and there's a lot of like movement, right? It's like the FMO hoppers. They've been with 4 different FMOs in 4 years. They worked for maybe a call center, and they're looking for more like jobs. They're looking for somebody else to solve those problems for them. And that's probably the bulk of the agents that we see that are reaching out. And they don't have a lot of patience in general. They don't have the patience to get through the contracting process and get going. And the second thing is they don't really have their life structure in a place where they're going to be able to be successful no matter who they're with.
Well, I'm going to add to that too. In those particular agents you're talking about, who are in an environment where they're like a W-2 employee, they work for a huge call center, right? I'm not going to name names, there's lots of them. But let's say they work in a big call center and they go through their first Medicare enrollment season. They're like, I wrote 700 applications. Okay, well, you wrote 700 applications, and first of all, I don't think that CMS or the carriers like hearing that. I don't think that if you're writing 700 apps in that site, like what kind of quality
you enrolled 700 people.
Yeah. What kind of a needs analysis did you really do with that consumer? Did you really listen to what they needed? Did you really check all their meds? Did you really check all their doctors? Did you find the right plan? Probably not. So I don't think when they say they wrote 700 apps, it's necessarily a good thing. And as we know, 350 of those took effect, right? But I think that's their perception. Like, I wrote 700. And of course, it's different when the company they're working for spends millions and millions of dollars to gen inbounds all day, to where the second that a call ends, they answer another one, and they're handling 100 inbound phone calls a day. It's different, and when you leave that environment to, I'm going to go be an independent agent and go start my own thing. Well, you don't have millions of dollars backing you to develop everything on that front end that gets that caller to your call queue. So it's a completely different environment that I think so many people don't necessarily appreciate, and they don't understand it.
Yeah, the other, and I do think, because we have had a lot of agents that have successfully navigated that with, they blended those two worlds, and that's kind of how we've really grown too over the past 3 years is having a solution for that. But the biggest thing I think of is agents have to be willing to put in the work to teach themselves the skill set, but they also have to set their lives up in a scenario that's going to put them available for success, right? Like, if you're paycheck to paycheck, you probably can't go be an independent agent and even go a couple of months where you're going to have lower income, right? Because there's a lot of times we'll contract agents and we'll try to vet them out. We'll ask how their life situation is, so we can put them in the best opportunity for success. And then by the time their contracting paperwork is essentially processed and the ink's dry, they're on to something else, right? They're out of the industry, or they've had to take another job with a...
Right. Yeah. They call you really hot to go. And exactly. And you tell them, hey, like, we got your documents. We're going to push this to the carrier as quick as possible. Some carriers, you're going to come out of background in a week. Some of them, you're a couple weeks, right? By the time you get out of background, you go do your certs or whatever else. You got to do your AHIP. I mean, for those of you who are in the industry, there's a little bit of a timeline. And particularly, let's say you're in the business and you're coming from another agency, a company, an FMO or somebody else, and you're not getting a release, that's that's a topic for another day, releases and that whole environment. But, that takes it much longer. So when you kind of set the expectation and say, it's going to take you a couple of weeks or 2 months, or, hey, because you're not getting releases, it'll be 3 months till you get going. You try to set it right, the expectation, but it doesn't matter. To your point, our staff is spending hours and hours getting everything ready, and before you know it, they already took a job somewhere else.
Yeah. It's a lot of it, we talked a little bit about some of the things that we used to do to generate business in the past, and then COVID and kind of like this modern agent. And what we should probably wrap today with is, overall, guys, I really feel like if you're an agent out there that's struggling to get going, I feel like COVID reset the board. It really did. I mean, it's only been the past 18 months, and especially in the healthcare side of things with like doctors' offices and insurance and a lot of these bigger entities where, us field agents and us here are us rebels in the West where we didn't adhere to as much of the COVID stuff. It was a little bit different. But for a lot of you, some of these industries are just really starting to be accepting of face-to-face again. And so I feel like if you're a field agent out there or if you're a virtual agent, the board's been reset because a lot of people got laid off during those times. A lot of the relationships in the grassroots communities and things like that. For example, if an agent had worked with Martha over at the local community center and Martha got laid off during COVID because they weren't doing anything in person, now there's Mary is now the new manager of the community center, and they have no idea what the prior relationships used to be. And so there's a massive resetting of the board and a massive opportunity out there, guys, for all of these like local grassroots things. Dan and I talk about this all the time, that there's also a big pendulum. We talked about it a little bit on the opening episode of the way that the market resets. And there's a lot of people that just want to go back to the way it used to be, a Main Street agent that they know, that they trust. They can just tune out all of the noise. They can tune out all of the telemarketer calls. And Dan probably hasn't sold a policy for I don't know how long, but there's still clients that he sold 15 years ago that will still call Dan. And the same thing with me. I got a call this morning from an agent, from a client that only wants to deal with me, that I met with a long time ago, and they just ignore all the noise. They tell me they've got a million things in the mail. So guys, there's a massive, massive opportunity. You don't think it's like doom and gloom out there? It's actually the opposite. If it's doom and gloom of anything, it's so many people are unwilling to capitalize and put the effort in and wrap their arms around the opportunity. And if there's any frustration that Dan and I ever feel, that's what we talk about most is like, hey, how can we message this out there to these agents? How can we get these agents to really see all these opportunities and then get them to go take advantage of it, right?
Yeah, I'd agree. We always say that, right? Everybody wants the money, but they don't want the work, right? That's really how it comes down. It's out there. And to your point, I think because so many of those agents, those middle tier agents and bottom tier agents, those agents that were writing 10, 15, 20 apps a year that have struggled, if you're an agent out there now and you're serious about this is my business and I'm going to work and do it, to your point, there's more opportunity now for those people than ever before because you really don't have that much competition. We're seeing more and more people that aren't willing to go around to build those relationships with the doctor's offices, to go sign up for all the little community health fairs and all the other things and be out there and have their game plan and have all that competition in the market. We just don't see that most people are willing to put in that kind of work. In fact, most agents, to your point, the newer ones are kind of coming in and be like, hey, so I got my license. Where are all of my leads? And then even sometimes we've had agents audacious enough to be like, well, so do you book my appointments for me? Like, no, you physically have to. It's like digging a hole. You have to pick up the shovel and at least shovel the dirt. Like you have to, like we can give you the tools, but like you have to at least pick up the phone and call the person and book your appointment on this lead that we paid for and gave you, So it has kind of gotten to that point, I think, is I guess that expectation of what they perceive things should be and how things really are very, very different right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But just kind of the close, guys, one of the whole reasons why we're doing this podcast is to give you guys actual tactical, useful information that you can do. And so whether you want to do things virtually, because we have agents still we have one of the things that makes us unique is our different agent types.
Yep.
We want to basically have tools and opportunities for however agents want to sell in this current modern world. We have great opportunities available, and there's opportunities available for you, all over the place. You just have to actually be the ones that give yourselves the skill set, have the knowledge, have the workplace, and you can make a fantastic living. You can build a book of business. We have agents that have been kind of a hybridish model that have built to 1,000 clients in 3 years on the books residually. They're making crazy money, and they're on the fast track to really having that life. So that most of it's not doom and gloom, right, guys? It's very positive out there.
Do we have 3 more minutes to talk about agent types and stuff like that? Because,
as long as this doesn't die, you're good.
all right. So
That
what?
one's dead.
Oh, really? The one I've been looking at the whole time?
That's why I moved it here.
Damn it.
I figured that.
Shit.
Surprise.
Surprise. You have some editing work now, Omar. But no, I mean, one thing that is very different about us too, we've had people ask, well, why would somebody want to be like a captive or an LOA or a solicitor? And more on another episode, right, where we talk about those agent types. But really, to kind of solve that problem, we have agents that, will advance commissions, you know what I mean? And because it is hard to sell a policy and wait 3-4 months to see revenue sometimes from your work. And people, it's one thing to wait a couple of weeks to get paid, but quite another for months. And so that is one thing that we've done, is trying to onboard people, advance them commissions for sales, and then, kind of we hold the bag, so to speak, and wait for those commission payments and true it up. So that's one thing that we do to get agents kind of that are newer, get them started, getting them on that path. And it's not permanent. It's just usually a temporary thing for a year or two until they can get their money right, and writing business and getting into it. So anyways, just that's another thing that, when we're talking about new versus old, the model didn't need to exist that way many years ago. And that's, again, part of trying to adapt to the way business is done now. Coming up with new models that work for agents, has been critical in part of the way that we've grown, as a company.
Yeah, so what we've just built is essentially different opportunities. If you want to be a traditional field agent, great. Get co-op dollars, run your own business, do things the way that, you've done in the past. That's what we have, that opportunity there. If you want to be selling, still own your own book of business, get paid directly from the carriers, sell remotely using virtual tools, we've had to build out mechanisms to support that as well. And then more on the other side, and like Dan said, out of necessity, we've built more all-in-the-box solutions, and usually there's a trade-off there somewhere. We have those as LOA or solicitor agent contracts because they're so heavily supported, and we're investing so heavily into those. But that's what we're doing as like FMOs, to try to offer different solutions, is meet the agents where you're at, like in your life financially, and where your goals are, and just try to offer different mechanisms and agent types to help you be successful.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, we're dying. Our equipment's dying, so let's wrap this one up. Good one? Better than episode 1? Maybe we'll get better and better.
I don't know. We'll see. Figure it out.
All right.
Catch you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Agent Boost.